Joining us now for further analysis on the graft claims of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, and Minister Nzimande's response is governance expert, Professor Alex Heever. Professor Alex, it's always good to speak to you. Now, I imagine you've listened to those audio recordings. And if you have, what's your take? Is that all the evidence we need?
No, it wouldn't be all the evidence, because a lot of it will effectively be regarded as hearsay. But it definitely suggests a case that needs to be answered by the Minister and by the board, in particular the chairperson and former CEO of NSFAS, because the conversation is fairly revealing and certainly needs to be interrogated fully. So there is definitely an issue here that needs to be fully engaged with. One can't make any final conclusions based on the information that's presented, but certainly it should trigger a very detailed and in-depth investigation into what has actually gone on at NSFAS.
So Prof, coming back to that to that recording, what are the questions that we need to ask stemming from that recording?
Well, what is indicated is that there are service providers that are indicating that they were effectively pressured to make certain payments in order to protect their contract, and they implicate various parties, including the South African Communist Party and the Minister. So those are that is a conversation that has occurred. That is pretty serious. It sounds plausible. It sounds authentic. But that's not sufficient without a full investigation. The other issues that are raised is that there was an attempt to interfere with an investigation into the former CEO with the Werksman's audit. And this is something that you occasionally do see in when people are trying to cover up corruption, is that they have a forensic investigation where they attempt to control the investigation to kind of whitewash or produce a softer result that allows you to walk away from the matter. And so these internal forensic audits can trigger something further, but it appears as though they very often don't go any further than that because they don't have any police powers, any powers to truly investigate a matter. This matter needs to be fully investigated by authorities with full powers of investigation. And that is what is clearly indicated here. What you can't say is what the final conclusion of that investigation would be. And what we also can't be sure of is whether or not we will get a fully engaged investigation. Because unfortunately, as we've seen in a number of other instances, our investigative authorities are not following through on investigating serious corruption within the state. There sometimes appears to be a reluctance to pursue matters to their full conclusion.
Well, the two issues here that might suggest that there will be some pressure on a thorough investigation. One, obviously, is the importance of the youth vote to political parties in this year's election. Now, would you imagine that if nothing happens, that many of those youth reluctantly will not vote for the ANC or the governing party? On the other hand, does it offer an opportunity for opposition parties? I mean, just yesterday I had a youth representative from Action SA who's calling out for this to be thoroughly investigated. Does this offer an opportunity for them to exert the necessary pressure and maybe for us to see some follow-through?
But I think that considerable pressure is going to arise from this, and certainly from all the parties, all the people and persons in the constituencies that are affected by this fund. It's worth noting that this is a Schedule 3A public entity, which is the same kind of public entity that is proposed for the National Health Insurance, and also is the kind of public entity that we have for the National Lotteries Commission. And a lot of questions have been raised about whether or not our existing legislative frameworks are capable of managing governance when large amounts of funds are being allocated, particularly for people who are most in need in South African society. So NSFAS is absolutely crucial for thousands and thousands of students. And we've seen that NSFAS has not performed effectively And one of the reasons that many public organizations don't perform effectively is because there are serious problems with the corporate governance structure. In this case, the minister appoints the entire board, which essentially establishes the risk of coordinated conduct between a political party and an entity such as this, which has a large procurement budget and a large amount of money that flows through it. So what we've got is potentially a risky corporate governance design that we as South Africans need to look at very carefully, because we cannot afford to have our public entities continue to operate in this manner. And all the public entities with this corporate governance design are systematically failing. And it's particularly the ones that have very large procurement budgets. But in this instance, we have weaknesses in service delivery. And we have the potential of a potential case of fraud in this instance, a credible case of fraud. And I say credible, it doesn't mean that it is concluded. It essentially needs to be investigated. But what we see thus far suggests that something needs to be taken. This needs to be taken very seriously.
So let's talk about the systems, because the allegations of corruption within NSFAS have persisted over the years despite numerous management changes. But I suppose it's the issues around the system. How would it be fixed? What needs to be done to correct this?
We essentially need for many of these public entities to separate, to remove the concentration of power in the hands of a member of the executive, because that at the moment is where the link is being created to a political party and to potential networks of people who operate through political parties. And this ultimately is a risk for all political parties that gain control over government. So in this case, the separation needs to be clear. These are organizations that do not require close supervision of a minister in terms of their day-to-day activities. If you look at the legislation governing NSFAS, you see that the minister has immense powers to interfere in this organization in pretty much the same way as you will find in many others. But it also means that there's a close relationship between the people who are appointed into the structure and the minister. And what that means is that the possibility and the risk of coordinated conduct is high. You eliminate that coordinated conduct by separating out the minister. The process of nomination, appointment, and removal needs to be that each of those processes need to be separated and the power taken away from the minister to be involved in those decisions. So they can't appoint a cabal and they can't coordinate with that organization. So what we need to do is look very carefully at what the correct corporate governance design needs to be for NSFAS as well as for many other public entities. Otherwise, this is going to continue, because what we're seeing now from Transnet to PRASA to SASA to all of these organizations is that the effects are systematic. You have poor leadership, so their performance is weak, and you have corruption. And those two destroy and hollow out the capabilities of these organizations, and we lose delivery. So we've got to change that. And when we change that, we will change the performance across the board of our public entities. But we should be preventing this kind of the risks that we're seeing, not waiting for them to happen, and then investigating and dealing with the subsequent mess, because the damage takes years to correct.
Now, the DA has called for Minister Nzimande to step down and is preparing criminal charges against him. DA leader John Steenhuisen has mentioned taking legal action and submitting requests for information related to NSFAS tenders. Now, something that's also come up, speaking to a youth representative, is that there are some young people that have been forced into lives of crime because they have not been getting their stipends or their grants on time. So some have turned to criminality and some have turned to prostitution. Can we expect any form of civil cases, if you will, from these individuals or certainly groups that may support these young people? Because their parents, and as we all are, obviously tormented that their children are being forced into this heinous activities.
Yeah, so there might be difficulties in creating a direct link between people's activities and the conduct of NSFAS. But there might be specific cases where NSFAS could credibly be held to account in civil action of various forms. But I think that in terms of the widespread harm that's done by the failure of public institutions like NSFAS, it does move into the realm of political action rather than civil action, because you must have a direct link. And it might be true that those are the outcomes, but the direct link may not be specific enough. But I think that in this case, what we are seeing is such a devastating impact on a crucial institution affecting thousands of students who struggle, in many cases, they struggle to gain access to these subsidies and for them to be properly allocated. Many people are losing their futures. So, again, that now becomes a political issue. And I think that we can definitely correct what is going on at NSFAS and have a well-functioning body. It's an absolutely crucial institution. It's
Prof, I'm afraid we've run short of time, but absolutely enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for unpacking those issues for us, Professor Alex van der Heever.